Well, I'm very excited today to bring a very interesting A to Z topic from Professor Christopher Newman at Northumbria University, who is a professor in space law and policy. Professor Christopher will talk you through that and have a great discussion at the end. Thank you very much, Christopher.
No problem at all. Really great to be here. Really great to be talking about this subject as well. It's an area that I think is going to increasingly become more important over the next few years as we see more satellites go into orbit, we see more activity in Earth orbit. How human behavior is regulated in that orbit is going to become something that we're going to need to start thinking about. The way I always equate it is think about how computer law and technology was about 25 years ago. So what I'm going to do is talk to you today about the type of stuff that I teach, the type of stuff that we do at Northumbria Law School, and give you a little flavor of that. So I talk about the law of outer space, but we also look at AI, robotics, and the law. We also look at cyber law as well. So we think about a whole range of things, from the rockets that go into outer space, self-driving cars, autonomous guidance systems on satellites. There's a whole range of material that we cover here in the law school in Northumbria and that we talk to students about, and we do it within a law degree as well. So it's not, as you might think, a specialist niche module. Sure, we have master's qualifications that we can do, but we embed it within our degree because we think the real challenge going forward for lawyers in the next part of the 21st century is going to be understanding the challenges posed by technology. Because the speed of development is just so fast and so furious at the minute. The market is pushing out so many products, so many different applications of technology. We can see AI is everywhere. We can see space-based applications are everywhere. The use of space has become really sort of commonplace now. And it's crossing international boundaries. It's not just for one jurisdiction to deal with this. These are global problems that require global solutions. So what we want is for our students to really think and develop the way of working across national boundaries to try and bring a real solution to these legal problems. And then you've got a mixture of different interests. You've got military interests. You've got commercial interests. You've got us, the common good, the people who just see the applications arrive. We've got interests as well. So we look at all of these different factors together and we start thinking about how do we make law in this area? And when we do make law, how do we interpret it? Because it is a specialist area of concern. It does require some specialist knowledge. And so what we do is we fuse the specialist technical with the specialist legal. So if we think about the lawmaking process as it is deliberative. People take the time. It's consultative. MPs and elected representatives will go out and speak to people and find out what they think about it. There'll be committees where people will discuss this and really talk over the issues. It's evidence-based. They'll have experts like myself go before parliamentary committees and go before select committees and actually say what we think the legal problems are. And it's aimed at everyone in society. It's aimed at, as I say, this notion of protecting the broader good. Technological development is different. It's developed by companies and it's driven by profit and it's driven by the marketplace. It's being driven by what people want to use. And it's aimed at a very specific interest group. It's aimed at the users. Those users might be a really narrow group of people as opposed to the whole of society. One of the catchphrases that you'll hear from the tech sector is move fast and break things. And you can't do that with society. You can't do that with law. So there is a tension between the nature of law and the nature of technology. When we're trying to regulate the two, it's really interesting to see how those tensions develop. And when we think about space, there's a whole range of issues that are really happening right now. We've got an increase in satellites going into space. We've got an increase in the way those satellites are being used in the form of what we call a constellation. That's a big group of satellites that all work together. We've got launch capacity. We've got things going into space more, and we've got new nations looking to develop this launch capacity as well. And like I say, we've got all these different groups of people looking to use space. One of the things that I work on, one of my areas of interest and areas of research, is what we call space situational awareness, understanding what space looks like and what the Earth's orbit looks like and how we can track it and what sort of requirements we should have to track it as well. Because there are a number of challenges and a number of developments that we need to think about right now in terms of what's happening in space. Not only are more satellites going up there, but we're developing technology to keep them up there for longer. We call this life extension and on-orbit service. But of course, there are some satellites that have been up there for ages and they don't work anymore. They're spinning around at 17,500 miles an hour and they're posing a danger to other operational satellites. So we're trying to get rid of them in a process called active debris removal. We're seeing the development of internet from space. Elon Musk's Starlink. We've got OneWeb. We've got Project Kuiper from Amazon. All of these companies are looking to put satellites in space to provide internet to these hard to access areas. We've got a whole range of threats to the orbital environments, pollution, military aggression, geopolitical uncertainty. And we've also got development of AI. So we've got satellites that not only work automatically, that is without human intervention, they work autonomously in the sense that they make decisions themselves. So what does space law look like, you might think? Well, I always say it's got three distinct areas, and I've broken it down here. It's got a top tier, international treaties, agreements between states, broad principles of behaviors that states have agreed to enact. And then there's also non-binding agreements. So these are agreements maybe on an international, maybe on a national level, between experts, between industry, between other types of people who use space to really sort of generate guidance and generate best practice to shape the way things actually work in space. And in the middle, we've got each country's own individual space laws. And most countries now are developing a space law. Most countries will have a space law. It's really interesting. If you look at your own jurisdiction, ask, how does space activity get authorized? Who does it? And you'll probably find there's some sort of space law behind it. So we've got a whole range of discussions and a whole range of modules that we have about this. We ask questions about why does a country need space legislation? How does the UK deal with it? What's the geopolitics behind the international treaties and the non-binding agreements? And how does that fit in with the technological advancements? We've got two really interesting areas of law. I won't talk in too much detail about this because this is something that you'll find when when you start to study the law in a bit more detail, or if you start to look at it, because domestically, you've got a vertical system. So you've got a parliament that sets the law and we're underneath it and parliament can impose punishments. But in an international sphere, all states are equal. So you've got to work much more by consensus and much more trying to seek a solution that works for everybody. So one of the things that we find in space and one of the things that we're seeing is that the treaty requires, and this is a bit of space law for you, authorization and continuing supervision of non-governmental entities. So what that means is the countries have got to keep an eye on their own space activity, and they've got to keep an eye on their own space companies. And this is accomplished by a licensing scheme. And what a licensing scheme does is it says, if you want to carry out space activity, you've got to get a license from us. And if you carry out space activity without a license, we're going to make it a criminal offense. So I want you to think about this in the same way that, for example, we think about learning to drive. If you think about the roads, the state's responsible for ensuring that driving is carried out safely, but it can't monitor every driver. It can't monitor every journey. So what it does is it puts in place a licensing system. It gives a driver's license, and road users demonstrate their competence to carry out their activity. They'll pass a driving test, they'll take driving lessons, and then they'll be granted a license. And they'll be granted a license to drive in a specific way. This is exactly what happens in space. There are punishments if you don't act within accordance with the license. So that's just a very quick overview of what space law looks like, of the type of stuff that I get involved with teaching. I hope that's been of interest, and I hope that's given you something new to think about in terms of the way in which space law really has an impact on our everyday life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that overview. I've got so many questions that I could ask you at this point. And I think to start off with, I just want to know a little bit more about you. How did you end up being a professor for space law and policy? What route did you take to get to where you are today?
So I was a solicitor in private practice, and I've always been interested in outer space activity. I've always had a real interest in this area. And so when I made the move into academia, I decided it was an area I was going to conduct research on. So I started with the very basic question, what's in place now? How do we deal with this type of thing right now? And this was back in 2006, 2007. So we didn't have SpaceX then. We didn't have a lot of space activity that we see now. There were about 1,400 operational satellites, whereas now we've got about 12,000 operational satellites in Earth's orbit. So things have changed really dramatically over the time that I've been studying the law of outer space, that I've been developing my expertise, and I've been working with experts from the space industry. I've been working with experts from, the legal industry as well, and pulling together an understanding of what we need to do to regulate human space activity.
Yes, it's an incredible task as well. And it's really interesting to look at the different tiers that you highlighted in the pyramid. Tell me a little bit more about the kind of skills that you would be required to work in this kind of field. You mentioned technical, you mentioned, interdisciplinary approaches. What kind of strengths and skills would you need to develop to be part of this exciting journey?
So the first thing I'm going to say, and it's going to sound slightly strange, but it's really obvious. You've got to have a passion for it. You've got to be interested in it. Without that, everything else falls apart. So when you're talking to me, you're talking to somebody who's a space enthusiast. I love working in the space area, but I also love working with the law as well. So that's the first thing I'll say to you. You've got to have a passion. And if children show a passion for an area, this is an area that 20 years ago might have got laughs. It might have got people looking slightly askance and going, is this a real thing? I would say develop and foster that enthusiasm, because it's absolutely priceless. When I'm teaching students, it's the first thing I look for. I look for enthusiasm, I look for a passion for it. And then what I look for is I look for a communicator. I look for people who can talk, people who can articulate, and people who can really get over complex ideas in a very simple way. One of the things that I see some students do is try and overcomplicate things and overinflate their writing style, whereas actually sometimes simplicity and clarity is what's needed. And then underneath that, I look for people who've got real writing skills, people who can write, people who can put their ideas down on paper in an elegant way. So for me, it's a sort of a threefold approach. And from that, you can get the training in the legal skills, in the skills of contract, in the skills of liability, in the skills of understanding the legal framework. That comes later. But having the enthusiasm, having the ability to communicate, both from an oral sense and from a written sense, that's the starting point. That's the building blocks I look for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned, negotiation at some point as well, in terms of, having to think about different countries working together, negotiating, and, honing in on those like communication skills really, to kind of drive policy and law. Um, yeah, do you have any other points around that at all?
Yes, I think having a clarity of argument is really useful when you're developing those negotiating skills. So again, learning to critically analyze, learning to not take things at face value, but to ask, what's going on here? What's the real issue? What are we trying to achieve here? So I think having that clarity of thought then allows you to communicate and to really directly say what's needed. Negotiation skills, so much of negotiation is about clarity, and it's about expressing what you want and expressing what you've got to give and what you want in return.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about ISP and ISP schools, we offer a lot of opportunities for our students to try and identify areas of passion. Sometimes it's a process of elimination. Sometimes it's a process of, oh, actually, I found an area that I want to be passionate about, and that's through international learning opportunities for students. So there's the scientist program that they can undertake, for example. What other things do you think students can do to try and identify those areas of passion quite early on?
I think exploring as many fields as possible, really having a look and thinking, what is it that I'm interested in? What is it that I want to really work in? What area do I want to try and develop? It might be that somebody wants to develop their skills and work practically in the space sector. So you're going to need mathematics. You're going to need to really focus in on the sciences. You're going to really need to think about, construction and actually building things, as well as the physical world. You might want to work in the area that I work. You might want to be a space lawyer, in which case, English, in which case, learning languages. I think languages are a really powerful tool. If you can communicate in someone's language, that makes a massive difference to them. So again, goes back to the communication skills. So I think there's a whole range of things that can really help someone develop those skills, from basic essay writing and understanding how to express yourself well, through to basic literacy and having the tools that mathematicians and scientists use. So I'm a great believer in exploring as much as you can your own individual potential and what you excel at and what you can offer in this sense.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Looking more now at the industries surrounding space and surrounding this area, what kind of companies are kind of actively recruiting professionals in this area? I think you mentioned kind of government. Are there particular like private industries as well that have the demand?
That's a great question, because I think we're seeing a real explosion in the number of companies that are getting involved in this. I think traditionally there are the big, what we call prime companies, the big defense companies. But I think now we're seeing a number of smaller companies, a number of companies that are looking to supply services to the bigger companies as well. So you've got a very, very sort of developing private sector in this. You've got government agencies, you've got national space agencies that are looking to recruit people who understand policy and understand law. You've got insurance companies. This is something that is becoming increasingly important. So financial and insurance companies. There is an old saying that I think it was taken from a book on the early years of the space program. No books, no Buck Rogers. And so financial services are becoming increasingly important in the space industry as well. So it's about having the vision to look across the employment spectrum, really, and say, what do I want to do? And how can I make that relevant to space? Because that's what I did. How can I make law relevant to space? So how can we make finance relevant to space, human resources relevant to space? All of the companies will have these needs. So it's not just about working in a company that provides space facilities. It's about supporting those companies as well, providing logistical support, providing material support, providing financial support.
Yes, okay. And you mentioned, working in this area from about 2006 onwards. So that's nearly 20 years ago. What's it going to look like in 20 years' time, do you think?
That's a fantastic question. And one that I don't really have a sensible answer to. I know where I'd like it to go, but if you'd have asked me 20 years ago what it was going to look like now, I wouldn't have picked the sort of the scenery and the orbital environment that we've got at the minute. I think it's really space is really useful for defense purposes. For national defense, I think states like having um, a space capability. So I think that's going to continue to grow, and I think the importance of space for national defense is going to continue to increase. I think the provision of services from space, so internet from space, I think is going to become more and more widespread. I think we're going to see a lot more as of low Earth orbit becoming just a place of work. We're going to see space stations develop there. That might not be 20 years, we might be 30, 40 years away from that. But I still think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to see Earth orbit develop as a workplace.
Wow, that's incredible. So you hear about remote working, but then potentially space working as well. Um,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So looking back at you and your passion for space, so what got you into that kind of area of passion, and then how did you then develop it into where you are now, I guess?
That's something that I often get asked, and it's really difficult to answer because I've always been interested in space ever since I was, 2, 3, 4 year old. My parents will tell stories about me sitting awake and looking at the stars and watching space documentaries and reading books about space, and it's a passion that's just always been there. And very early on, I realized that literacy was my strength, numeracy and mathematics wasn't my strength. So I
Hmm.
kind of fostered the skills that I had. I made sure that I was very good at writing and very good at communicating, both orally and on paper. I made sure that I developed my argumentative skills and my written essays, so that when I was writing stuff, it was of interest to people. And then I sort of fell into the law, and I found myself being a solicitor, and it was not something that I was particularly enjoying. I didn't enjoy being a solicitor at the time. So I thought, right, how can I make the law fun for me? And then I found academia, and then I found space law. So for me, it was all about setting my own individual goals. And most of my goals throughout my life has been doing things that I enjoy.
Okay, well, and that leads me nicely to the next question. So obviously finding something that you enjoy, combining that as a career. Do you have any advice for parents that might be watching, on how they can maybe support their child, to pursue a career in law, or to pursue the newer opportunities that are coming with kind of the space area as well?
Yes, absolutely. This is something that I wish should have happened to me, and I wish on children in future. And it's foster the love and foster the fun, foster the things that they really enjoy and they gravitate towards. As parents, we know what we want. And as parents, we kind of have a direction in mind and we think that's the right direction. But sometimes we've just got to let our kids lead. We've got to let them go in the direction that they are naturally drawn into. So the first thing I would say is foster and embrace that enthusiasm, because somebody being enthusiastic about something is a gift. It's a wonderful gift because you can't help but be drawn into it. I like to think one of my strengths as a lecturer is that I have this love, and it brings people with me. It brings people along with me to understand what I want to understand. So the best bit of advice I can give is foster the things, and really try and enhance the things that your children love, and make them and look at them and ask them what do they want and how can they focus. We'll have ideas and we can offer advice and we can shape, but let the enthusiasm, let the love, let the fun lead.
That's fantastic advice as well. And I can tell that you're very passionate about the subject area as well, which is very exciting and very engaging for us to view that as well. Um, in terms of Northumbria University, do you want to tell me a little bit about how that specialism landed in a university in the north of England. I'm quite interested to understand, the development behind it and maybe the future developments as well.
I'm really lucky in the place that I work. I'm really lucky with the management team that I work under, and I'm really lucky that I've found a place that embraces new technology in the law. And it happened in about 2018 is when I moved to Northumbria as a professor, and I'd been for interviews at other places, and those other places had, I don't want to say laughed at me, but it's been very clear that they didn't think space law was a priority for them. When I went to Northumbria, the head of law looked and he went, yes, this is a direction that we want to go in. This is something that we feel is innovative. It's something that looks like it's going to be a skill set that our students are going to need in the future. And how right he was. You look at the advances in AI, you look at the advances in technology, you look at the advances in space activity. And my goodness, what a visionary the guy was, because he was exactly right. And he pulled me in and he allowed me to the freedom, if you like, and the latitude to say, I want to set up this. I want to set up a space law team. I want to set up a technology law team. I want to set up an AI module, and I want to run them, and I want to offer them to all students. I don't just want to have a little niche course that we offer to a few. I want to offer them to all of our undergraduate law students so that all law students study alongside the traditional law and contract and tortious law and public law and equity and trusts. I want technology, I want AI, I want space, I want cyber to sit alongside that and have it so that it's a normal thing. So that in 10, you asked me what life was going to be like in 20 years. I hope in 20 years, space law is something that people just do. It's not a niche area, it's not regarded as a novel area. It's just something that's another aspect of law.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm sure you're going to be right as well, especially given the growth in the kind of sector already. So, looking more at your students, then obviously they're receiving quite a kind of breadth of knowledge within law. You covered quite a few areas there. Where do they end up going afterwards then? Once they complete the degree and they've, embarked on this journey to study space law.
Yeah, so a number of them will end up as a large number of them will end up as lawyers. They will either be solicitors, as we have in the United Kingdom, either solicitors or barristers. They will end up going into the legal profession, working as legal advocates, drawing on their legal knowledge, drawing on the knowledge of technology and the basic elements of law as well, and developing very successful legal careers. Throughout the country, the law firms throughout, England and Wales are full of our graduates, full of our law graduates. There are some that don't. We know that the law degree, one of the advantages, I think, of having a law degree, and one of the advantages certainly that I would say with our law degree, is that it doesn't tie you to the legal profession. We have graduates in the civil service. We have graduates in the armed forces. We have graduates in private industry as well. So the options when you study a law degree, it doesn't just mean that you're going to be a lawyer. It means that you've got a series of skills that are valued by a whole range of employers in business, in government, in the military. And so you can go out there and you can really sort of use the skills that you've developed, but maybe not necessarily purely for legal purposes.
Yeah, so that makes pursuing a degree potentially in law something that's quite transferable for individuals and for students. So at ISP, we have a big commitment to support our students to develop life competencies, from a very early age,
Yeah.
mapping that and ensuring there's opportunities to kind of develop them. What are the opportunities for your students, not necessarily professionally, but to continue learning? So if they want to specialize a bit more, what's the routes then?
That's a really great point about it's not just the knowledge that we put into them, it's the skills that we give them and it's the things that they develop. So we try and give them what we call commercial awareness. So not just the ability to understand the law, but the ability to live in a law firm, to actually work in a law firm. We offer training for the professional side of the industry. We also offer theoretical courses. I offer a master's in space law. We offer a master's in cyber law, which covers AI as well. So you can do a range of postgraduate courses. You can, really focus your knowledge so that you've got a very, very detailed and specific knowledge of an area of law. And we hope that students will sort of really take the skills we've given them, the the communication skills, the commercial awareness skills, the negotiation skills, the presentation skills, and take that out and take that with them, or use it to go on and engage in further study, as I say, in a master's in space law, a master's in cyber law, or some other area of specialized law that we offer.
Yeah, okay, that sounds fantastic. And my final question would be about, a child today thinking about a degree or thinking about career in law or thinking about something space or cyber related. What kind of resources could you recommend for them to start exploring? Are there any particular books or films or organizations that they maybe should be researching now to kind of help them understand what the future careers in this area is about?
So it's really interesting. There's a number of sources that I use. There's a number of podcasts that I look at. I look at things on YouTube. There's books that are out there. Space law books tend to be really concentrated at the higher end of the legal spec. They tend to be very specialist. So I wouldn't recommend going out and buying space law books or anything like that, because it presupposes a lot of existing legal knowledge, which really doesn't exist. My advice is just to immerse yourself. There's so much out there. There is so much material out there on YouTube in podcast form, and just really sort of develop an awareness and an understanding of the space industry. If you're looking to work in that area, the best thing you can do is understand the whole ecosystem. So jump into YouTube channels, jump into podcasts, and really try and understand what it is that the space industry is trying to achieve. And you'll get a wide variety of views. You get a wide variety of ideas and insights, and that's all to the good, because you can then start to see, right, how do we start to build this shared understanding? How do we start to build a consensus on this area when there are so many different opinions and so many different perspectives out there? So no one specific book, no one specific resource, just immerse yourself in that world.
That's great advice, and I love the word kind of immersing and immersive because it's about all encompassing, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
surrounding yourself with that kind of the knowledge and the information. Listen, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your really interesting kind of career and the really interesting sector. If you've got any other final thoughts, please feel free to share. We have really enjoyed speaking to you today. So thank you very much, Christopher.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to be. It's been wonderful to speak with you and ISP. And I go back to the first piece of advice I give. Make it fun and embrace the enthusiasm. If you see that your child has something and a passion for something, foster that and nurture it. It might not be space, it might be something completely different. It might be dance, it might be music, it might be reading, whatever it is. That's a real precious gift they've got there, because that enthusiasm carries them so far through life. And it's something that, I wouldn't be where I was today if I didn't have that enthusiasm. So I hope that helps.